And wasn't that from a guy named Paulson, who, wasn't he the Treasury Secretary? Wasn't he also a former Goldman Sachs? Ooh, could it be? Gets better. Bubbles. Do you remember the housing bubble? Do you remember the dot-com bubble? Are you living in a commodities bubble? Why does Goldman Sachs have something to do with all that? So with that, here's a little piece from Matt Taibbi of the Rolling Stone magazine. And maybe it's time for you to learn.
Hi, my name is Matt Taibbi. I'm a reporter for Rolling Stone magazine, and I'm here to talk about the story behind my story in this month's issue, The Great American Bubble Machine. In the story, we focus on 6 bubbles, but we're primarily focusing on 3 bubbles that happened in the last 2 decades. There was the internet bubble, the housing/credit bubble that everybody knows about, and there's a third one that most people don't really know a whole lot about, and that's the commodities bubble. And that's when gas prices shot up to over $4 a gallon. It had absolutely nothing to do with supply and demand. Supply was actually up worldwide. Demand was rising at a slower rate than supply, and it was banks like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley that were primarily responsible for that. Actually, last summer, every barrel of oil was traded 27 times before it was actually delivered to a customer that consumed it. And what's important to understand about this is that it shows pretty much everybody is affected by the behavior of banks like Goldman Sachs. One of the things that's a recurring theme in this story is that Goldman and banks like Goldman, they're expert at going after these big pools of investor capital, and what they do is they get these large institutional investors. You know, they had them investing in the internet, mortgage-backed securities, and they're also the biggest consumers of commodities futures, of oil futures. The big scam here is that they found ways to take a whole bunch of crap, right, slap it with a AAA rating, and sell it to a bunch of big institutional investors. The important thing to remember is that when they designed this market to trade commodities, and it's not just oil, but any commodity, that's corn, wheat, natural gas, there was a law that was passed in the 30s, the Commodity Futures Exchange Act. Back then, people understood that if there were too many speculators in the market, that speculators would begin to affect prices artificially. So they placed limits on how many speculators there could be on the market. What happened in the last 2 decades is that banks like Goldman Sachs very quietly and more or less secretly got exemptions to this rule. They slowly began to overtake real supply and demand in the market, and what happened last summer is we sort of reached the point where the speculators dominated the market, and that's why prices now have very little to do with real supply and demand as a result of that change.
So how do you like following the money? Pretty exciting, isn't it? You get to find out where the money goes. So here's some fun stuff. I'm going to go through just some of the people in their position and what they did before they got in the cabinet, before they got in the government, that revolving door from Goldman Sachs into our government, making laws, maybe covering Goldman Sachs butts, making special things, and then back to Goldman Sachs and, looping around. Let alone, gee, I'm on a special commission, started by Robert Rubin. Well, let's find out about the Hamilton Project. So anyway, we'll start with his buddy, Joe Biden, also known as Senator Credit Card. Okay, his efforts to limit the busing for desegregation. Remember, that's him, and his 5 draft deferments. How many times can you get deferred, Mr. Biden? Yeah. So now we got a guy who won't show us his birth certificate. Okay, and we got a draft dodger. These are leaders, right? That's what we call leaders. And anyway, Biden in 2007 alone took almost $25,000 from Robert Rubin, related Citicorp. Yeah, so the bankers slide money to candidates. Isn't that one of the best investments bankers can make? We'll get into that. Let's not leave that thought. But this is just so you know. And guess who was the keynote speaker at the Hamilton Project? The 2010 kickoff event just a few days ago. Could it have been Joe Biden? My gosh. So, how much you get paid to do that speaking thing? He probably couldn't accept the money now, but I'm sure after he gets out, he'll get a cushy, whatever gig. Isn't that what they all get? So it gets better, Note to that in his address, Biden paid tribute to Obama's bipartisan deficit commission, something that the Hamilton Project and Robert Rubin, Goldman Sachs, think Goldman Sachs, have been pushing for years because it really means cuts in entitlements. Again, have a look at Senator Obama's 2006 speech at the Hamilton Project. Okay? And remember, once again, when you look at, we're also going to show you how people are tied into different things. So I'll give you the web of, hey, what contacts and connections do these individuals have? So anyway, now we'll take a look at Roger Altman. We're going to try to go a little bit in alphabetical, but Altman. So let's see what he's tied to. The Bilderberg Group, the Hamilton Project. I know you don't want to believe me, but check it out. Draw the lines for yourself. He's the Assistant Treasury Secretary, okay? And he was forced out based on a scandal. I always like to look at people's ties, huh? Yeah. Altman's kind of interesting. Once again, if you look up, Altman was forced out from his position as Assistant Treasury Secretary, once again, a former Goldman Sachs guy, right, with the Hamilton Project or whatever, because of his record-keeping scandal. He's a guy I want in the Treasury because he can't keep records. Rather interesting, He serves as the Assistant Secretary of Treasury under none other than Mr. Goldman Sachs, Robert Rubin. So once again, nice little, connection there. Now let's look at Leo Bernard. Show him the ties. Bernard is the United States Undersecretary of Treasury for International Affairs in the administration of Barry Soetoro. I know you want to call him Barack Hussien, but let's remember his original name, okay, where he went from. What was his daddy's name? Let's work with the whole theory here. Okay, so anyway, the other thing is, this gal, she is an associate and protege of Mr. Robert Rubin, okay? She has written numerous articles and books on the joys of outsourcing overseas. Yeah, what happened to our economy? Where is everything made now? Yeah, how many accountants do you need if it's made over there? How many mechanical engineers? How many assemblers? How many testers? How many forklift drivers? How many warehouse people? I wonder, huh? Just a thought. Bernard also worked at the Brookings. This will keep showing up again. The Brookings Institute, okay, which is embedded with Goldman Sachs. Rubin's Hamilton Project came out of Brookings. Well, now we'll look at Warren Buffett. You've heard of him. Let's look at his ties. Yeah, Buffett's got some interesting ties, huh? And we all know about Warren Buffett. And he tends to make money even as you lose money and even as people lose. But Buffett has invested billions into Goldman Sachs. Boy, these are pretty good. Now, he runs insurance companies, huh? Also, the many things the Sage of Omaha does, okay? He's palling around. Remember, he's on Obama's, fundraisers and economic advisor. Yeah. So once again, billions invested in Goldman Sachs, buddy of Barry Soetoro. Let's not forget Hussein. Okay. Gets better. Oh, you remember Hillary Clinton? Ran against him, right? Yeah, Hillary. That's right, Hillary. She's now Secretary of State. Rather interesting because, if you look at it, Goldman Sachs gave her a lot of money to run. Yeah. So there's money in there, huh? And I know you don't want to believe me, but, maybe you want to do your own due diligence. I like the website Open Secrets. Take a look at Open Secrets because it shows you the campaign contributions. I recommend you look at them, okay? And it's kind of interesting because even her hubby, who chose ex-Goldman Sachs chief Robert Rubin to serve for the White House, to serve in his White House. So yeah, we had Goldman Sachs in the previous White House back in those days, okay? And we had Paulson, Goldman Sachs in the Bush White House, and now we have, Goldman Sachs, and we get what? Timothy Geithner, head of the New York Fed. Does it make you wonder, is this once again for the people, by the people, or is this for the bankers, by the bankers? Who's it benefiting? Once again, wasn't it Goldman Sachs whose profits exceeded, whose bonuses, did they exceed their profits? How do you do that? You accountants on the show, out there in the audience, come on board and show Mr. Me, Daniel Happney, the guy who asks questions. How is it that your bonuses exceed your profits? Boy, you must be getting your money from the grandchildren of the viewers.